So Louise, what were your immediate thoughts when you first heard of the Deanery Planning Process?
So my first thoughts were that I was really interested in finding out what the diocese had in mind for this process. And I've been involved in similar processes before in my previous role. And to be honest, I think every parish and every deanery should be constantly rethinking why it's here, what it's for. And therefore, this is a process that probably we should always be engaging with.
And how did the Deanery get started with the Deanery Planning Process?
So initially, we introduced it to the Deanery Development Group, and we spent quite a lot of time just looking at the data and exploring the questions, including what were called the soft questions. But we're very fortunate because on our DDG group, we have somebody who's a very strategic thinker and has done some really quite high-powered work in national organisations. So he took the data and with somebody else put it together as SWOT analyses, so strengths, weaknesses, etc. And with the 5 categories that that both the Deanery Development Plan asked us to look at, but also going back to our Next Steps questionnaire from 2021. And so once we'd done that, we sort of we distilled all that information down onto 5 sides of A4, which then this person took, and he then put it all into one single strategic framework document, which has been incredibly helpful.
Great. Has the data thrown up any surprises?
I think the biggest surprise is when we start looking at data from other deaneries, because as a deanery, particularly focusing on parish share, we're very conscious that our parish share has reduced quite significantly since 2019 with the impact of COVID. But then when we started looking at the data, we realised that for the number of population that we actually have in this deanery, we are paying a significant amount per head of population, especially when you compare it to some of the other deaneries, which has actually made us feel a bit better about ourselves.
Do you have any anxieties about the process?
I think there's always an anxiety about whether people will engage with it. So as a DDG, we've always tried to make sure that our thinking is shared with Deanery Synod and is also shared with parishes, particularly now that we've reached a stage where we have identified our vision and our values, and we've moved on to our aims, and we're actually calling them ambitions rather than aims. And so the anxieties are really about how do we get that out to the wider congregations, and how do we make sure that people are really engaged with the process.
What would flourishing mission look like in your deanery?
So as a deanery, we have decided that we do want to be a deanery that grows, that is growing, and we'd like to be churches that are flourishing. So we'd like every church to flourish, but we'd also like to be realistic about whether there are some churches which actually aren't flourishing and can't flourish. And so it may be that mission may involve some quite difficult decisions within the deanery. But we really want to be places which are both growing inside our church buildings, so in terms of who worships with us, but also to be growing in the way that we engage with our wider communities. So we want to get outside the church walls. And certainly we think that flourishing it will be churches which are getting outside, which are engaging more widely with their local communities, and are finding ways to talk about why we're here, what's the point, what is our faith about, and what is this treasure that we've got that is worth sharing. So I think it's both an internal thing in enabling people's confidence so that they actually feel that they can talk about their faith, and also external so that we feel that we can engage with people where they are and then begin to have those conversations about the big questions of life, which we believe that everybody has, but not everybody connects with with church.
And finally, what encouragement would you give to others?
Don't be afraid of the process. Find people who like numbers, because they can interpret the numbers for you. And I'm somebody, I like numbers, but I've learned that not everybody does, and it's really important to have words as well as numbers. So I think that's probably my initial thoughts. But also, everything grows. I mean, we're part of a dynamic world, and so growth sometimes feels like a scary word or even a dirty word. But in order to exist, we need to grow, and we need to think about what does that growth mean, and is it growth in depth of spirituality as well as growth in actual numbers? And I believe that the two are interconnected, that the more you think about your faith, the deeper you go into your own spirituality, the more churches will become attractive places for other people to be part of.